Welcome to this channel once again. This is Ken Simiyu. Remember to comment and subscribe so that we can move together as friends of Ken Simiyu. Sometimes it is said that if you want to know the direction of a country, listen to the people on the ground. Recently, while boarding a matatu from Utawala to town, in the process of engaging people, one person had made a comment that generated a lot of interest and discussion from the rest of the people who were in that vehicle. And this lady commented and said that Kenya requires the likes of the late Michuki, the likes of the late Professor Makoha, and Dr. Fred Matiang'i just to be at the scene and make Kenya a great nation. And this prompted a discussion that was so immense and deep. And after careful thought and analysis, I started asking the people why they thought the comments from this lady was such an important comment. And I also started analyzing the lives and the times of these three great men. And for those of you who may not know, that the three men were ministers in this country at a different dispensation. Michuki, for example, was one of the key ministers in the Kibaki administration, where he came on board when Kibaki had just become the president. And a slight history about this man: he was born somewhere in Murang'a in 1932, and he schooled in Kenya and also schooled abroad. He was a businessman come a politician, but one of the things that I want to dwell on was his life as a politician. This man became the minister of internal security.
Is preachers in the streets with their loud voices. We will not have touts shouting everything beyond 30 meters that can annoy, because it is annoying and troubling.
And changed the course of this country. This man became also the Minister of Environment and changed the course of this country. He was a ruthless politician. I remember one time when he came to Kitale, that was Michuki accompanying the president and other ministers. And for some reason, we had a meeting at Kitale Club. And people kept on asking very many questions that were affecting the country. And one of the things that people kept on asking was that there was a lot of, criminality in the district by then. There was a lot of gang violence. And people were saying that the police were colluding with the thugs to terrorize Wananchi. There was a lot of deaths. There was some murder that had taken place in a place called Matisi in Trans Nzoia. And one of the things that people wanted the president to address was the issue of insecurity in the district. So we went for a public meeting that was at the showground. And whereas all the ministers spoke, apparently Michuki was not given a chance to speak. So when the president stood up to speak, people were shouting and they wanted Michuki to speak. And Michuki, in his own characteristic way of doing things, stood up and had to say this one word. As the minister in charge of internal security, where the police force is domiciled, he stood up and gave a directive that tomorrow by 9, all the police officers in the district should have been transferred. And I can tell you that the whole field went wild. People were dancing and celebrating. And then the president was shocked and taken aback. This was the Michuki that I knew, a man who will give commands. And I can tell you that the following day by 9, the lorries had come from all over, and all the police officers were being transferred. In other words, the police were being brought in, and the police who were in the district were being taken out. That is the Michuki that people wanted to see. And as we look at the lives of these great men, Michuki is well remembered when he gave the famous Michuki rules in transport. The man completely drove out the cartels in the Ministry of, in transport sector. I remember that time I was in Nairobi, and what began as a simple, matter, we were able to walk for a whole 1 month because the matatus had resisted and they had refused to put in the speed governors, to put the seat belt, the touts to put on the uniform, and the drivers to have the uniform, and the drivers were also supposed to have a badge at any given time. And remember, we were supposed to now, at least a Nissan had to carry 3 on every row. That was mandatory. Unlike those years where a seat that is supposed to be reserved for 3 people, you'll find as even 7 people sitting on that seat. But Michuki stood the ground. For 1 month we walked, going to work, back to work, from work, walking. But we never gave up. And Michuki is remembered to dead. We remember the Michuki rules. And I wish that the current CS, whom is my friend Murkomen, will pick a coup from Michuki and become man who can mean what he says and be able to enforce the Michuki rules and also introduce other issues that are affecting Kenyans. Sometimes you walk in the streets of Nairobi and you'll find that the borders have become a menace. They drive, they never obey any traffic laws. They never bother whether they are driving on the wrong side of the road. Sometimes you have a lot of noise in town. That should be curbed. Another guy that I will really want us to look at is Makoha, the late Professor Makoha, that no-nonsense minister, and especially remember him when he was the Minister of Education. And the guy was tough, was articulate, was on time. I remember most of the time he was supervising schools. And I can tell you that teachers and principals were really having rough, especially if they were not doing the right thing. That is a professor who was, a man who was renowned. But when it came to work, he really worked. He drove the cartels out of the Ministry of Education. He removed, remember the big A's that students used to get. He ensured that there were no A's that were not merited for. And that alone changed the course of the history of this country. And may his soul rest in peace. Another guy that, when you ask people about the ministers who have done a lot for this country is Dr. Matiang'i. I am not holding brief for him because he's still alive. The rest of the two are now the late, but Matiang'i is still alive. But if you find Kenyans, they will always make reference to Dr. Matiang'i. And Matiang'i was, though he had his own weaknesses, but he was a man who transformed the course of the history of this country. The way ministers must execute their work and their mandate. I remember when he was the Minister of Interior, how he was able to combat traffic offenders on the road, on how he went after the cartels in the Ministry of Transport, on how he was able to fight the bandits even in the North Rift. Long live such men. The question that we are asking ourselves is that are our ministers working as much as we expect them to do, because they are drawing money from the exchequer. Of course, we have others who have really performed. And of course, you know that others have not really performed. And there, people have really complained. But Kenyans, let's wake up. Let's speak our voice. When we see public officers who are not delivering, let's speak our voice. Let's ensure that we put these guys on toes so they can deliver as per the Constitution of Kenya. God bless Kenya. God bless Kenyans.